need to make it clear.
Order. I did not make the comment.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Kia ora, Aotearoa. Good evening and welcome to Citizen Aid, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, he is the editor of independent news site livenews.co.nz, commentator and journalist Selwyn Manning, and he is an author, a columnist and political commentator, proof that the revolution will be televised, blogger Chris Trotter. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1, how elegant is John Key's state-owned asset sales solution? Issue 2, this week it's stopping the welfare for those with arrest warrants. How much more mileage can National get out of Benny bashing? And issue 3 tonight, other than being mistaken for slavishly devoting New Zealand to America's future wars, how is New Zealand playing America off against China and the new Cold War friction point of the Pacific? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word. But let's kick things off tonight with issue 1. The entire asset sale process has been paused in its tracks by Māori reasserting their treaty muscle. Key has become so relaxed about all of this that he's almost horizontal. Selwyn, by turning down the Māori King's offer for a national hui, can Key's divide and rule tactics protect him from legal action 5 weeks from now?
No, and he should deploy his friends, Tariana Turia and Peter Sharples to that hui, surely, as an envoy, instead of this strange situation of distance that manifests between the cabinet and everyone else. If you're in Key's shoes or in Key's strategist's shoes, you'd be saying work the corporate iwi, but try to hold on for as long as you can to iwi proper in the regions. By doing this type of tactic, by embracing that kind of distance type of ethos, the idea there, all he's doing is caning his party in a way that he needs to embrace Māori.
Chris, will this 5-week pretense of good faith, because I think that's pretty much where it's leading, be enough to strengthen the government's legal case when challenged? And does this make the likelihood of legislation more likely?
I think what's happening within Māoridom may have passed the point at which the government strategists actually have much in the way of understanding. When this katahitanga mood grasps Māoridom, it's very hard to predict where it will all end. The intervention of the Māori King and his spokesperson, Tuku Rangi Morgan, who of course is in need of some reburnishing of his credentials, and this is certainly allowing him to shine. But when that gathering takes place, I'm not sure what will happen. I think there are some real currents flowing quite strongly through Māoridom now. One of the strongest is that the iwi Leadership Forum may well have stepped too far ahead of the people, of Hapu and Whanau. And this may be a very good opportunity to, in a sense, reconnect. And if they reconnect in the way which seems likely, because a hui of this magnitude hasn't happened for nearly 30 years, then I suspect what will occur is that they will go for a collective solution, which is the very last thing that the government wants. The government has for several years now, and I think this probably includes Labour governments as well as this current national one, have really developed these links with the corporate leadership that has grown up as a result of the big treaty settlements. And this is fine. This is like dealing with like. It's much more comfortable than with the more populist nationalist groups now represented by Mana. So quite how they will cope, how the Crown will cope with a united Māoridom.
It'll legislate. Surely they'll legislate.
Well, I don't know whether they can afford to do that. A united Māoridom is a very, very powerful thing.
Just on that legislation thing, this Māori issue is obviously huge,
Yes,
and
yeah.
it unpicks the whole kind of sense of the plan right from the start. But let's be real about it. It's one part of a complex problem for the national-led government
Yeah,
on this.
that's right.
Like we talked last time when I was on with
Yeah,
Chris.
yeah.
The problems relating to commodity prices,
Yes.
with coal commodity prices with solid energy. You've got TY Point complexities there
with Meridian. Yep.
Rio Tinto and all that complexity. They're saying, well, we don't like this, it's too costly, we don't like this, re-look at the cost. We're pulling it. All of these question marks, as we said on the last program, put that air of no confidence in the values of those assets if they're going to float.
And this morning on,
So,
on Radio
You're
New
talking
Zealand
billions of dollars.
National,
Yeah.
you had Brian Gaynor,
Yes, that's right.
who I thought delivered as close to a death sentence to this process as someone in his position who, you know, let's not beat about the bush. His employer stands to gain
That's right.
from this process. But what he said was the momentum was building very, very encouragingly for the Mighty River partial privatisation. The stalling of that process not only has killed all that momentum, but now with the passage of time, the inability of the process to be, you know, restarted in an effective manner until well into the first part of next year.
Yep.
He almost said, I don't think
Well,
it
when
can be done.
then, Selwyn, when does the economics become completely unpolitical? Because they're unpopular right now.
Yeah.
When do they become unpolitical?
Well, I think if you looked at the Finance Minister, Bill English, it's gone beyond that point now. You know, he is charged with trying to actually position his government in an economic sense for the next raft of bilaterals leading up to the budget next year. How can he do that successfully with these question marks around what is a key plank in the government's economy?
sure.
You know, Key and his people could legislate if they so choose. To what gain? It doesn't actually put clarity into all of that sale program on each of those assets at all. All it does is force Māori into a position where they're totally at odds with the current government. It can't do that.
Chris, each delay strengthens the chances of the referendum next year. How would a resounding referendum against asset sales impact Key's claim of mandate?
Well, clearly it will challenge John Key's interpretation of the election as supplying him with the necessary mandate. A specific question put to the people, particularly if the response is substantial.
Sure,
In other words, if over 50% of
yep.
those eligible to vote participate, would be a very serious obstacle for the government to overcome. However, I think it's looking more and more as though that complex series of events, which is now making the whole partial privatisation process go critical, may give the government the opportunity of not having to face that challenge.
On a fiscal prudence kind of platform at least. The other thing relating to the referendum, I think there is still a huge challenge out there. The Green Parties, as I understand, has delivered over 100,000 signatures to that petition.
That's right.
Labor around about 80. The challenge is to those affiliates, to the CTU, to come up to the mark and get their organisers off their desks, off their desk chairs, and out there getting signatures.
Absolutely.
That's where the challenge on this whole thing is.
Final question of both of you. Predictions for asset sales. What happens next? Come on. What happens
More
next?
and more, I'm coming to the belief that this process will be indefinitely postponed.
And the impact?
Certainly until after the election in 2014. Another election in which asset sales will be one of the key issues in dispute. If the Labour Party had a leader worthy of the name, it would be celebrating. You know my opinions on that matter.
Prediction on asset sales.
Oh yeah, last time we talked about it, I thought it was a 2014 election year issue, and I think Chris is absolutely right.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2. You know the government needs a distraction when Paula trots out another crackdown on beneficiaries. Mums back to work when babies turn 1, drug testing beneficiaries, restrictions on beneficiary sexual reproduction, and this week it's stopping welfare for those with arrest warrants. Chris, how much more mileage can National get out of Benny bashing?
Well, as long as Paula's imagination is up to the task, I think this can probably go on indefinitely.
It's almost become the Christchurch earthquake of answers. Oh, that's the thing that's holding us back.
Well,
That's the thing that's holding
I
us
would
back.
like to ask the Minister for Social Welfare just one question, which I think has some real significance in terms of what she's proposing to do. Are these people who have yet to be served with an arrest warrant for whatever charge? Because if that is the case, then no trial has taken place.
That's right.
And they are entitled to the presumption of innocence. So if they are officially innocent until a jury or a judge pronounces them otherwise, then on what possible legal basis can she withhold payment of benefits? On the other hand, if these are people who were due to be sentenced and failed to appear and a bench warrant has been issued, that's a different matter.
Yep.
They are people who are guilty, they should front up and receive their punishment, and certainly I think the state is entitled to say, well, we're not going to supply you with the wherewithal to evade your responsibilities indefinitely.
With those other half, half of those 15,000 with arrest warrants, who I take it people who are earning salaries, would they just have their income taken off them while they're waiting for their warrant to be executed as well, or is it just beneficiaries?
Absolutely not.
Right.
It would be cause for a real complaint, I think, legal challenge at employment court or tribunal or wherever.
Yeah.
If, in the absence of a guilty verdict, an employer was simply to cease paying them.
Yes.
I mean, an employer might try to sack them, but once again, you have to have proper cause for that.
Selwyn, this is great dog whistle politics, isn't it? If there's one thing Joe Talkback hates more than beneficiaries, it's a beneficiary with an arrest warrant. But what are the consequences of this knee-jerk policy? I mean, is it being well thought out? Paula's last one on drug testing beneficiaries turns out to cost us twice as much as it's going to save us. Are they actually looking at what's going to happen?
No, they're looking at other more abstract values in this kind of awful attack on trying to actually segregate a part of New Zealand society to the side so we can all point finger and blame. What gets me about this whole thing, one, the fiscal aspects obviously fall down, and also the time investment that those people around Paula Bennett are putting in to trying to actually identify other ways of whacking these people is mind-boggling. But it seems to me that what they're doing here is they're using talkback radio as the forum to test and litmus test their various ideas. I would suggest that if they want to win 2014, irrespective of who the leader is of the Labour Party and the others, well then they better stop doing that type of thing, because talkback radio will fail them in the end. The other thing is that it hits me. Paula Bennett, or as was said on Breakfast TV this morning, Paula Beneficiary, in a bit of a Freudian slip. She's a constituency MP, an electorate MP out west. What happens if a person who has found themselves out of work, who's having trouble actually getting, some sort of return from the tax that they've put into the government coffers over the years by way of a benefit, go to her office and say, we're having real access problems here. How are they treated? How are the people in her electorate treated when they are seeking assistance to get a benefit they're entitled to and have contributed to for their working life? I suspect that there is an air around Paula Bennett that would exclude them not only from getting assistance, but finding ways to make sure they're excluded from having a legal right to draw on it. That's the concern.
Chris, Roy Morgan's poll this month showed a real unemployment rate of 9.1%, with an underemployed rate pushing past 18%. The official rate is 6.8%. When does that economic pressure become political?
Well, in terms of the minister's own electorate, the sort of massive downturn in manufacturing that we're seeing will have impact, in the seat that she currently holds. I mean, the people that are being laid off, the 600 who held the headlines this week briefly, I mean, these are not young people at McDonald's or, they're not people who have been in casual employment. These are people who have worked for years.
These are jobs,
100, been laid off
specialised
at
in a
TY.
particular area.
The people, who won't get jobs at the paper mill. I mean, these are the classic good jobs, which everyone used to aspire to.
Yeah.
Now, these aren't sort of layabouts, drug smoking bludgers. These were, until this misfortune, which was not brought upon themselves by their own actions, but by a collapsing world commodities market. These people are not going to take kindly to someone who treats them now as a lower form of life.
And Chris, my premise, I suppose, is that every taxpayer, every employee in this country has a sense of, and should be able to assert a sense of ownership and a return from the government coffers by way of welfare at that time when they need it. And this is an environment that's been peddled by Paula Bennett and her types to exclude people from that rightful access.
How do you think those people are going to feel, Chris? Let's say they're suddenly on the unemployment benefit. They're not aware that they've got an arrest warrant out for a couple of fines that they haven't dealt with. The first thing they know is their benefits cut off. The AP has missed. They're not paying their rent. They ring up and demand an appointment down with the WINS office, go down there, and the next thing they get is arrested because the police are waiting there because, well, you haven't paid the... How are they going to feel towards social services at that point? I mean, isn't this just alienation?
Well, that scenario would drive people to all kinds of antisocial behaviour. And this is something else that I think she needs to take on board. I mean, quite apart from the potentially quite dangerous situations that scenario raises as possibilities, there's also, the problem that if you don't have any money from social welfare, the chances must be high that you're going to be getting more arrest warrants, aren't you? Because, you're going to be driven to crime. I mean, that is... that's the whole premise of Les Miserables.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Selwyn, what are the byproducts of suddenly cutting 8,200 people off of welfare? I mean, you're going to get a sudden drop in the unemployment numbers. That'll look good. And she'll be out there strutting the walk if she gets that. But won't you get a spike in crime?
What this does is give me a sense of deja vu. And reporting in South Auckland in the 1990s, I saw the consequential impact of overcrowding. Exactly what you're talking about here, the wave of effluent that came from the mother of all budgets in 1991, bit in the South Auckland area and in intense urban environments in this country by mid-1990s. We saw overcrowding, we saw an increase in meningococcal disease, we saw a situation where market rents for state house tenants started making people have to live in smaller places but more people, up to, and I remember reporting cases where there were families of 24 in a 3-bedroom home in South Auckland. What we saw is, as soon as one child got over the flu or whatever other communicable disease they were suffering, and it went around all the other kids in the bedroom, they caught the off product of that again. And that set in train a blowout in the health budget what was then a Crown Health enterprise called South Auckland Health. So the whole thing fell down fiscally, let alone morally and socially. I can see the beginnings of that kind of thing coming here. There's no answer from a minister like Paula Bennett, who is charged to actually resolve and put a safety net in for that kind of thing to stop happening. There is no effort to even do so from what I can see.
Final question to both of you. Are Nationals so good at spin? Are they so convincing at their spin that they've managed to make solo mothers hate beneficiaries? Is that the level? Is that the level of it?
Well, you've never lost ground if you're a Conservative Party by creating an other for your followers to vent all their rage upon, whether it be wharfies or communists
or gypsies,
or long-haired hippies, or welfare bludgers.
Or past national voters who have fallen out of employment.
But it's. I mean, she's called the Minister of Social Welfare. I mean, it's what Selwyn's described is it's just so tragic, and it's all so predictable.
That's the tragedy of it.
And you just wonder how many times we have to go around these traps. The great problem, of course, and this is where the real cynicism of the National Party may be found, is that typically, certainly in New Zealand, people don't become enraged. They simply withdraw. They succumb to what is called anomie, the sense that nothing matters, Nothing they do will change anything. Society really isn't for them, and you just become this kind of floater in the world with no points of contact, no way of holding yourself down. You certainly don't vote.
But what we saw is that sleeping dog idea in South Auckland by the 1996 to 99 period awaken and mobilise politically to actually rid the country of the problems they were facing.
Do governments have a responsibility to provide a social floor?
Oh, yes,
A
absolutely.
very basic minimum
Absolutely.
that every citizen and permanent resident can expect.
All of us share that responsibility.
Yeah.
If our neighbour was on tough times and their kids were starving and sick, how awful would you be as a neighbour in your community if you started pointing the finger of blame at them as opposed to giving them some of your bounty?
Do we require a social floor? That's the responsibility of government?
Well, that's always been the way here, but you've got to look at the reaction to the reports on child poverty. There is a certain kind of New Zealander who will absolutely and without hesitation point the finger.
Yeah.
And simply accept that the sins of the fathers will be visited on the children.
Yeah. Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3. Other than being mistaken for slavishly devoting New Zealand to America's future wars, how is New Zealand playing America off against China in the new Cold War friction point of the Pacific? Selwyn, does Kim.com's arrest show America trying to impose their authority in New Zealand? Is that one manifestation of that?
Yes, it is, and that was the tip of the iceberg. To actually achieve that, there's obviously a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes as far as influence and access to our security apparatus, if you like. But beyond this, the New Zealand government, irrespective of the party that is leading it at any given time, is in an awful situation where on one side you've got China with our trade relationships and our economic kind of dependencies there, and we've got our old school security alliance, security declarations with the United States. At some stage, when you're trying to actually maintain a position in there, you become the meat or the spam between two major big bits of bread. The Chinese have had, in the last few weeks, the grace to demonstrate a softly approach to what has been a huge roller coaster of showbiz coming from the United States to demonstrate their rekindled interest in the Pacific. And I think, thankfully, China has taken that role because it has made a history of being one that contains its defence policy, not expand it. You can't say the same for the United States.
Was Hillary Clinton's Chinese tentacles comment extraordinary?
Yeah, and so was John Key's nodding around those kind of issues. And,
Wasn't it just?
and just for the record, it was great how the social media picked up on something that we pushed out from 36 Parallel, where you and Russell Brown and others then built a case where what you read on the US State Department website, official transcript, official record, is not necessarily what was said. And I'm sure John Key felt he got a get out of jail card on that.
Chris, with Helen Clark set to be the first female leader of the UN and Gross's nomination towards the WTO, New Zealand's diplomatic muscle will be greater than ever. How should it use it with China? How should it use it with America?
Well, I'm not sure muscle is the right word there.
Mojo?
Martin. I mean, what we have been able to secure in the way of visible positions like the chair of the Security Council in the past has been, I think, a Herculean effort on the part of MFAT, which Murray McCully seems to have absolutely no regard for whatsoever.
Like tourism in the 90s.
Yes. And, our reputation as an honest broker has stood us in extremely good stead, especially after the mid-80s and the whole nuclear free legislation, which detached us in a very public way from the United States, at least, in the way that we'd been regarded for so many years after World War II. But I really think that New Zealand is going to quite quickly be faced with a choice between these two giants. And frankly, the choice we make must be determined by the degree to which one or the other benefits us as a nation.
Yep.
And at the moment, the relationship with China is the one which is paying dividends.
Sure.
Huge dividends. in
Massive.
terms of trade.
I can say that
Yep.
one of the things that concerned China in the lead up to the signing of the Washington Declaration was how far is this national-led government going to go? Is it going to be an alliance or a declaration?
Yep.
China felt concerned at a declaration,
Yep.
but you could see it was relieved that it was not an alliance that commits New Zealand to future wars. There's still kind of room there.
Final quick question to both of you. Who do we have more to fear from, America or China?
Oh, a declining power is always much more dangerous than a rising one.
China or America?
I don't think New Zealand should take a fearful approach. It should sort its own independence out and actually stick to that.
Let's wrap the show with final word. Selwyn, your final word this week is?
Well, the New Zealand Herald's headline relating to John Armstrong's column this morning about Prime Minister John Key going up to Vladivostok to attend APEC, where he was going to push Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, into negotiations concluding on the free trade agreement.
Sure.
I would suggest it would not be wise for John Key to push Vladimir Putin anywhere. He may just feel the cold, sharp piece of steel in his kidney, considering that this guy is a former KGB officer. So a word of caution on that, perhaps.
Thank you very much, Chris. Your final word this week.
Well, one of the things that happened over the last week or so was this extraordinary commentary delivered from the bench by Judge Raoul Neve when sentencing Guy Hallwright for what was clearly a very unpleasant event at the end of Mount Eden Road in Auckland. What heartened me about that was the near universal revulsion from the wealthiest to the poorest Kiwi at what was said from the bench by the judge. And I was reassured because what it indicated was that when confronted with the sort of language that Judge Neve used and the sentiments he expressed, those egalitarian instincts which we prize so highly and which often seem to have fallen into abeyance just leap to the fore. This is a country that still believes in its heart that Jack is as good as his master, and if his master ever tells Jack that that's not true, then Jack gets very pissed off.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Selwyn. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. I'm no monarchist, but when the Māori King says, "Oi, hui at my place, we need to have a sit down over water rights," you go over and have a hui at his place for a sit down over water rights, because he's the Māori King. You don't shrug your shoulders like a spoilt little brat being asked to do something he doesn't wanna with a nah. Key's response to the invitation put out by the Māori King to discuss this vitally important issue is the exact same contempt he showed the original Māori Council claim, the exact same contempt he has shown attacking the mana of the tribunal, the exact same contempt he showed by stating he could ignore them, and the exact same contempt he showed when he told them to hurry up with the report. In fact, the only constant here has been Key's utter contempt to engage. This latest slap in the face to Māoridom by not turning up when the Māori King asks, however, is beneath the position of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister of New Zealand must be inclusive and never exclusive. Even if he disagrees with what they have to say, he has to listen. That's the job. That's what we pay him for. That's the responsibility of the position. Key's contempt for that engagement helps explain why inequality is at an all-time historic high and why there are 270,000 kids in poverty. This Prime Minister is as disconnected from reality as Fashion Week is. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded new citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.